Howdy, Travis from KnowHow here. Welcome to the Restoration Playbook Podcast, where the KnowHow team sits down with industry experts to break down how you can build a world class workforce. This season, we're talking to experienced leader builders in the restoration industry. These are leaders that have thought through not only how do I become a good leader myself, but how do I cultivate that next generation of leadership in my company. This could not come at a more critical time for the restoration industry as more and more young people feel ill equipped to step into that mantle of leadership that organizations are going to need in order to thrive for decades or generations to come. This is all part of a larger series that we have in relation to our book, Building Leaders, which we launched earlier this fall, which dives into how over a dozen experts in the restoration industry think about investing in creating that next generation of leadership in their company. Today, we're having Julie Johnson on the podcast, and she is one of the best in my opinion, at thinking about not only how do you become a good leader, but how do you create leaders? And how do you turn and identify and turn people who have high potential in your organization into the leaders that you think they could be? Julie walks us through her playbook here, and she knows all about it because she's gone herself from not knowing how to be a leader, but knowing the situation called her to be one, to becoming that leader that creates leaders. She's the former owner of Alpha Omega Disaster Restoration, which she co founded and grew from a small garage based operation into a leading business in Billings, Montana. And for those keeping score at home, that's actually two Montana based entrepreneurs that we've featured back to back. We had the privilege of chatting with Mark Springer from Day Spring Restoration last month, also based in Bozeman, Montana. Purely coincidence? Not at all, because the Know How team is watching Yellowstone or anything like that. There must be something about those rolling hills of Montana that create excellent, thoughtful, caring entrepreneurs because I'm excited to feature our conversation with Julie today. She dives into not only leadership, but the emotional intelligence side of leadership. And she talks about the importance of creating strong financial bench strength as a leadership team. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of leaders, and it can lead to a lot of problems if that's not a skill that's developed among your most senior level of management. She walks into the importance of that and how to grow that muscle for your team. Really excited to jump into that conversation. Spoiler alert at the end, we ask every person we interview what timeless truth or motto from another leader has resonated with them. And Julie's answer was probably the best one that I had heard, and it has stuck with me for a long time since her and I had this conversation. So I'm really excited for you to hear it as well. Before we jump into this conversation with Julie, though, I want to share three quick things with you. First, if you're looking for more insights like the insights that we get from this conversation with Julie, I've got great news. Like I said, we've got an entire book that we recently released that takes the insights and expertise and perspective of some of the top leaders in the restoration industry, leaders like Julie, leaders like Mark Springer, Ben Looper, Marcy Richardson, and tons others, and turns it into a playbook for how you can think about building your leadership team at your organization. Second, if you are interested in this book, but you're saying, hey, I don't have time to download an ebook and read it all, you can go to buildingleadersbook.com, by the way, if you are interested, or you can get a hard copy on Amazon, search for Building Leaders by KnowHow. But if you're saying, I am constantly on the go, then we've got great news. We've actually produced an official audiobook for Building Leaders that's available for free on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast right now. Search for Building Leaders book by KnowHow. You'll find it, and we'll also include it in the show notes. And then finally, I just want to give a brief synopsis on KnowHow if you're not familiar with what we do and KnowHow. KnowHow is an app designed to rapidly onboard new hires, upskill staff, and provide on demand expert guidance for whatever task is next. What we do is we combine artificial intelligence with your company's proven methods, your playbook for how you want staff to do things. And when the two meet, what happens is that employees, whether they're on a job site or in the office, are able to work competently and confidently because they have all the information they need in a moment's notice. You're able to train them up and go from day one to confident faster than ever before because they have a roadmap to going from not knowing much about the role that they just were hired for to having all the skills necessary to fulfill the promises that your organization makes to your customers. And so, if you are getting tired of outdated operations manuals or pinching and zooming PDFs on your phone when you're out on a job site, you need know how. With know how in your team's pockets, your staff have all the how to they need to go wherever the day takes them and be able to work confidently wherever they are. So, head to tryknowhow.com for more information. And now, let's turn it over to this incredibly impactful conversation with Julie Johnson.
So, hi, my name is Julie Johnson, and I was the owner of Alpha Omega Disaster Restoration in Billings, Montana for over 15 years. And this is what I think about building leaders.
Well, so Julie, I appreciate you joining us, and I'm really excited to dive into these subjects of building leaders, but specifically looking on how you build that financial bench strength among your leaders, as well as creating a culture that cultivates and grows leaders. But before we get started, could you walk me through your background? Like from a little girl, did you always dream of owning a restoration company one day, or how did you end up, owning and running Alpha Omega Disaster Restoration? And walk me through that journey a little bit.
So, that's a great question. There's actually a story behind that. So, actually, growing up, my father was an entrepreneur, and I never really thought about the fact that I would someday own my own business as I was, growing up and observing what he was doing to run his company. But my mom tells me stories about when I was little, I would like play desk with her. She'd be working. She ran the office with the company that they owned, and I would get paper from the bank. They'd give me all their old like deposit slips that were garbage and computer paper that they didn't need. And I would play desk. So I guess it started from a really early age that I was destined to be an entrepreneur. But um, I didn't even know what a restoration company was. My husband and I had just gotten married. Was a recent graduate from Montana State University in Bozeman, go Bobcats. And I worked for a bank. And my husband went to work for a restoration company in our town. And of course, he loved it. And the reason you love restoration and why he and I both loved restoration is because it gives you an opportunity to serve people who are going through something that is traumatic to them, which, is damage to their home. So he loved it and came home one day and he's like, "Hey, Julie, I think I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go with a national disaster restoration team to New Orleans." It's just right after Hurricane Katrina. And they said they'd give us an advance of $5,000, so it should be good. And I was like, no, wait, what? And so anyway, this is where it's just, I am a planner. I like to have all of my ducks in order. Willie jokes even to this day that we'd be broke if it wasn't for me. So I had to take some time to get used to that idea. And it was really a godsend, honestly, because it was meant to be. And my heart went from heck no to okay, we can do this. So we did it. He quit his job. He went to work for a national disaster restoration company in New Orleans and earned enough money to start our own company. And that's what we did. He came back the next year. We started Alpha Omega Disaster Restoration. At the time, we had two other employees, and we'd meet in our garage around the plastic, table and chairs, the coffee pot on the counter. So that was how we got started. And because I like a sure thing, I did not leave my job right away. I worked full time still at the same thing. And about 3 months into Alpha Omega, it was apparent that we were busy. One of the insurance companies took us on right away to do their program, which was another blessing in us starting Alpha Omega because, it was a sure thing with work. And that was due to my husband's reputation with the previous company that he worked for in town. So I quit my job and I did the bookkeeping, I painted, I cleaned. Like it was just, we were jack of all trades at the time because we were growing our company. So, or just starting our company. So that's how it all got started. What we did is we created ourselves jobs because we hadn't really started our business yet, even though we did officially. But that's one thing I always talk about. When Willie and I started Alpha Omega, we really created ourselves jobs and we were good at that. And then all of a sudden, we had to run a business and learn what that was like, which was fun, but a little turbulent at times.
Hey,
So,
every business owner, I think, would, if
yeah.
they were honest, say the same thing that,
Yeah.
hey, it's exciting and it's fun to come on a podcast and share the highlights, but there's a lot of turbulence along the way. You know,
Exactly.
I think of the fact that, you grew up around entrepreneurship. Your
Mhm.
husband obviously seems to be the type to like see the opportunity and like, hey, let's take it. And I think someone that has the strengths that you have of hey, looking at the numbers and let's calculate the risks and stuff like that. In one way, they might think I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship. It's just too risky for me.
Mhm.
I see all the ways things could go sideways if I'm not careful, and so I no thanks. That's not the road for me. In your case, you said, "Well, I have this financial background, and I seem to be good at thinking about the details and stuff like that. And so this would be a tremendous asset to this company. And so how did you shift your perspective from, hey, this is something I should avoid because I'm just naturally inclined to like, think about things like the dollars and cents and all that stuff a little bit more to, in fact, actually, I think the company will be a lot stronger if I lean into this strength that I have and bring it to the table.
Yes. So I think with Willie, he's definitely you were right about that. He's definitely the entrepreneur. I am the one that every entrepreneur needs as far as like that other person to come alongside to them and execute the things that need to be done to achieve the dream, right? Like
Mhm.
setting up the finances is one of the big things that needs to be done. So, I think that it's just a gifting of mine. And so I would love to sit here and say, college prepared me for this and all of the things. I have a finance degree and, you know, I would, it, it did in a way where I learned the basics. I learned uh, you know, what it took to actually make money, but putting it into play in real life with a company that you own, where it's your house that is, collateral for the loan company is a whole nother story. So I don't know if that really answers your question as far as just leaning into setting up a company well financially. There are some basic principles that Willie and I both were like, we will not borrow more than what we know we can pay back. And we didn't. When we sold our company, we had $75,000 in debt. That's it. And it was like an auto loan that I could have easily paid off, but I just chose not to. So it was just very important for us to grow more. organically. Just as we could afford, we bought more equipment. As we could afford, we moved out of the garage, out of the back of the house into a location. We rented that location. Then the next step was to buy something that we ran our company out of that was, it wasn't definitely not the Taj Mahal. It was, but it was nice and it worked. And then we finally purchased the building that Alpha Omega still rents out of today, under the new ownership. And so we did not just borrow as much money as we needed to buy everything that we needed at the time. So I think that that foundational decision that we made early on played a large part in why we were successful, just growing organically in our market.
And let's pull on that thread a little bit because you made a decision to say this is what we will do and this is what we won't do, and
Mhm.
we're okay sacrificing maybe some rocket fuel growth that might look nice on a graph somewhere for the sake of doing things wisely and prudently and making sure that we're always in a strong position. Um, what are some ways that you've seen other restoration companies just when they're weighing all those different factors, like what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen people make?
Well, I think one of the big mistakes is not having enough cash reserve in restoration. There's so much time that passes from when you get a job until you're paid for the job in full. And you need to pay vendors on time in the meantime. You need to, of course, pay your employees on time in the meantime. And so for me, when I was, at the helm at Alpha running all of that, I just made sure that we had a cash reserve. Initially, when we first started our company, of course, we had a line of credit, but it was my goal, and I achieved my goal to build my own line of credit. So I wasn't having to borrow the money from a bank. I had the money set aside so that we could roll with the punches, if you will, as restoration ebbed and flowed and cash flow ebbed and flowed. We were very good at collecting cash, though. Our days sale outstanding for Alpha Omega was, you know, ran around 15 days. So we really worked the process because we knew what the blunders were and what, the consequences of those blunders would be. And I just um, really felt passionate about making sure that the people that we're hiring for the jobs, like subcontractors and our employees and such, were paid on time because those are the people that then people want to work for, right? And it's challenging out there to find good employees and to find good subcontractors. And so you want to like roll out the right carpet. And that's one way that we did that. So um, I don't know what else.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, I hear a lot there that's really fascinating, but what I hear, the theme across all of it is intentionality, right?
Mhm.
You'd said, "Hey, we're not going to just let something sit in, accounts receivable for a while and then, oh yeah, we'll circle back to this." Like we were intentional, we had a process, we knew what we had to do.
Right.
Similarly, hey, it's really important to us that we pay our contractors on time. And so we've kind of set out at the start, this is how we're going to do business. And then we were methodical in making sure that that happened and it required effort. And there's always a million fires to put out. And so you have to decide, what am I going to prioritize and what am I not? And it sounds like, you had said, hey,
Yeah.
this is just something we're going to prioritize because it's important to us. And so I think it's one thing to have that financial strength and rigor and competency in yourself. It's another to train and cultivate leaders that are similarly passionate about that. And so, how did you manage as the team continued to grow to not just have like, oh yeah, and Julie just cares about the numbers, so make sure you know the numbers if you're talking to Julie, but instead for it to be like a shared collective value of the entire organization and you breeding that value into new leaders. How did you go about that?
And it is challenging. And I'm not going to sit and say that I was perfect at that because I have a very high expectation for watching your numbers. And some people were very good at it, and some people just weren't because they would, it takes a person that's really conscientious about that. And we all know the restoration industry is there's so many moving pieces so quickly, and there's so many demands on your time. And so it's oftentimes with our production staff, like our project managers and our superintendents, they have demands in the field and demands at the office. And what I found over the years is that uh, the demands in the field sometimes took precedence over the demands in the office, which was definitely a challenge. Um, but I will say that serving our customer is why we do what we do. And so it was a juggling act. We want them in the field, we want them serving our customers, but at at home, if you will, back at the office, there are also responsibilities like making sure that we're not behind on estimating or not behind on um, invoicing drop payments or invoicing in general or the like. So I'll just preface what I'm going to say with that because we weren't perfect at it. But what we did to try to stay on top of our numbers, for one, everybody typically knew what it was that the piece of the pie that they were responsible for. So if you're a project manager, you're
Okay.
responsible for making sure the project at the project level flows like it should. We are profitable. Whatever we determined our margin to be on the job that they were managing, they were meeting. If they weren't meeting it, why? And if they knew why, sometimes you don't, right? Like, let's all be honest. I mean, everyone can say that they want to hit a 45% margin on a repair job, but I think the real world sometimes says that we're not going to do that, right? So, um, if you know your numbers, though, you know why, and that's really what we wanted to know, or also, then if the with my office staff, they were responsible for a bigger picture, P&L potentially, so everyone knew their part. And I think that's important. And then what my role was is just to oversee, all of the parts and make sure that people were doing what they needed to do. So we met weekly with our project managers and discussed jobs at a each job at a job level, of course, and gave everybody the opportunity to ask questions. Um, that keeps people accountable, right? So that that Julie's going to be asking, or Willie's going to be asking, or your peers are going to be asking, and so that keeps everybody on their toes as far as making sure that they know where they're at. So we did that. And then as far as just like monthly financials, we would share that with our leadership team. So we all knew how the company was doing as a whole. That way, if there were any levers we needed to pull to adjust, that we were able to do that together and we were on the same page and leading our team towards where we wanted to go. So,
What I hear you saying, Julie, is that you made sure every single person knew the numbers, the metrics, what it was that they were responsible for. And they also knew that they were gonna be asked about it soon, that
mm,
there was this tension, so not only could they couldn't say, "Yeah, yeah, I got it under control." They had to give a report on the status of it, and that just became the culture of the company. Is that a good summary?
sure. Yes. Yeah. People knew that they were going to be asked about their numbers. And so they need to know their numbers. And if they didn't know their numbers, it's not a comfortable feeling, right? When your peers are asking you, hey, what's up with that job? Oh, I don't know. Nobody wants to say that. So it was important. It was definitely a culture in our company to make sure that people knew where they were at on their projects.
Did you have any situations where you had high performers that were, like, excellent at the specific job function that they were tasked with. But just that level of rigor and accountability, they weren't they just didn't they didn't like, frankly. Maybe they viewed it as too, controlling or whatever. And you knew that, hey, they're good enough at what they do that I could probably let them go, but let them continue to operate and thrive in their strength, but that would come at the detriment of the larger culture. Do you have some of those did you have some of those people that were like, I like to just play jazz and improv it uh, in a vacuum, you're like, "Yeah, it's actually pretty good." But at the whole, you could see, hey, there's a bigger cultural issue that we have to, manage for here.
Oh, yes, for sure. And sometimes that would even ebb and flow, you know? So the short answer is yes. And so what we would do in that situation is just, revisit why it's important for us that we're not. I remember one time we were a part of a networking group that came to our company. This is a funny story, but it was actually really pivotal in our growing, my particular growth actually was also making and overseeing financials. They asked us if we wanted to be a nonprofit company. And at first, of
Interesting.
course, we're like all offended. And I was like, "Why would I want to be a nonprofit?" Right. But what I got out of that though is that I didn't really know my numbers.
Hmm.
And so uh, um, I always used that particular example when I would talk to our project managers and just say, are you doing this for free? Like, are we a nonprofit? Like, we would just talk about everyone has bills to pay, right? Like, a household has bills to pay. You have to earn a certain amount of money. The same goes for a company. And of course, we want to be profitable. So it's just, I share that story because I think it's um, more normal, if you will, or maybe not normal. That's not the right word. It's more prevalent than we realize. I don't believe that some people really know their numbers. And you have to know your numbers so that you can make decisions. And of course, we don't want to be nonprofit, right? We want to earn a certain percent, at the end of the year. And so when we got into a situation where somebody would rather be in the field, and I kind of chuckle at that because it actually describes my husband to
Hmm.
a T. He loved being in the field and he wanted to be with the customer and he wanted to, mentor our team and make sure that they knew what they were, obviously doing and that they were adhering to the quality that we had a standard for at our company as well. So he's always in the field. And I'm like, Willie, you're leading up, but you have to help me with this. And so it was one of the things as we grew our company. And then, of course, we're running a company as husband and wife. So sometimes that's super. Um, but we got to a point where he's like, yes, okay. So I see. I need to drive this as the leader of ops. Find the financials of our jobs it is important and we have to make it a priority. And so when we really made that shift, I would say probably around year 8 or 9, honestly. We got a lot better at that.
Hmm. So I also
Really.
hear you saying, it might not be overnight that you're able to,
Oh, wow.
develop that muscle.
Well, and you're not going to be perfect at it. So
Yeah.
let's say and you're intentional and you're like, okay, this needs to become more of a priority. I see where I might be going wrong here. You're working at it. You're always working at it and keeping it at the forefront because, when the local college floods and you have to stop, drop, and roll, you can't sit back at your desk and be like, okay, got to make sure it's profitable. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's so many balls we're juggling in the restoration industry that, and probably others as well, but, it just still needs to be on the forefront.
Yeah.
So
Are there any I'm trying to think of, specifically instilling this culture among your managers and their reports. Were there any, specific tools or I've heard, hey, this weekly Excel doc that we all hop into? What tangible things did you put in front of people to help create and maintain this culture?
So we had a couple of things. First of all, we had a budget versus actual spreadsheet we created for the job level. So when we had, and I'm going to talk mostly about repair jobs right now, because these are the jobs that we really took a lot of time to budget and track our actual expenses. So, what the discipline that we put into place is, before the job started, after we have a final price that we have either negotiated or we're under contract with the customer for a specific dollar amount, then we budget the project based on that. And so I created this spreadsheet where our team would budget and then they were responsible for filling in actual costs to that offset their budget so that they could see if they were meeting their budget essentially, and that was intended to just work along as the progress of the job progress, as it progressed so that they could just always have a real time view of what their project costs. Um, from a company standpoint, we also just worked off spreadsheets, when not now, but when I owned Alpha, when Willie and I owned Alpha, we had a WIP spreadsheet that I just really kept like a baseball game. So
Hmm.
jobs on deck, you know, ones that we need to go and inspect, and then what that's the adjuster, what's contracted, what's work in progress, what is pending closure, what's accounts receivable, and then finally what's closed. And as the job progressed, I literally just progressed them in the buckets. When we met every week, we would talk about percent complete on the job and where we were at. So we knew what our earned income was and what was unearned. We talked about change orders as they progressed weekly so that we could make sure that our budget and our revenue and our budget would adjust based on any change orders that the customer requested. And I just always had my pulse on where we were at. Now, I didn't do this alone, right? So I had an office staff that I just taught all of this to.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because over the years, I have had office staff that came to me with a bunch of experience, working in this type of role for another company. And also office staff that came to me with not a ton of relevant experience, but where I always hired people based on character, thinking that I could teach them anything that I wanted them to know. Of course, within reason, as far as like what their strengths were and that type of stuff. And so I would do that. I hired office staff where I just took them under my wing and I taught them everything I needed to know and held them to a standard that I set as far as accuracy and how quickly things needed to be done. And we just worked really well. I found someone to yin and yang from,
Hmm.
so if I was there, things were still getting done like I wanted them to get done. And it just worked really well for us. We worked a big company when Willie and I owned Alsa. We had about 30 employees and we did about $5 million in revenue every year. So um, it was just fun. We had a great team.
And I hear that a lot of the reason why I think things were fun, and you were able to be effective is, again, because there was this process that you had thought through, "This is how we do it." You weren't shooting from the hip. You didn't say, "Hey, new staff, you guys just do whatever you feel works best." There was the alpha omega way of doing things. And once everyone's speaking the same language, then, you're not fighting necessarily the process fires. You're able to come up a level and obviously solve some bigger problems, but have some fun together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So, as a leader, it's very important to make sure your team knows where the target is, right? So they have to know where to shoot for. And so, really, that was my job and Willie's job. Oversaw everything financial, HR related, all of the buckets. And Willie really oversaw the ops. And so, um, it was just my job was to make sure everyone knew where the target was. And sometimes the target changed. So sometimes I had to communicate a target change, So, and then just kind of orchestrate everybody working together to reach that common goal. And so that is what was so fun about leading a team of 30 people is that, one person might be gone or might be having an off day, but another person's able to step in. And that's exactly what we have at Alpha Omega is just truly, um, I have never been a part of anything like it.
Hmm.
Our team, it's a family. They love each other. They are there to help each other along the way. Some people lead, some people are, you know, following along, trying to achieve the common goal of course, serving our customer and making a little money while we're doing it.
Yes.
So,
I think that's a really good pivot point because I also really want to explore this culture building leaders and developing new leaders. And one of the I think there's two things that as we ask around, we've heard that Alpha Omega was really well regarded for. I think like the finance ops piece and the team culture piece. And I could see some people thinking that those might be at odds with each other. Like I picture, maybe two ditches. One is the like classic Silicon Valley ping pong tables, someone giving you a massage while you're coding and all that, like overly indulgent, oh, we've got a great team culture. We all break for beers at 2 p.m. every day, right? And then the other ditch might be that like Scrooge McDuck, penny pinching, not recognizing the needs of the employees. Like some people could view a strong, healthy team culture and financial pragmatism at odds with one another. Help me understand how you were able to do both of those well, where you were able to, watch your P&L at the same time have a team culture that everyone's like, "Yeah, this feels like a family."
mhm. Gosh, I read that question when it was sent over to me, and I thought, wow, what a great question. And this is actually the one that just reflecting on how we did it. Um, you know, it's it goes along the lines of the fact that direct conversations that can sometimes be difficult conversations are kind. And you work together as you treat people like you would want to be treated, which in case means that if I'm doing something wrong, I would want somebody to tell me about it. And we really just did everyday life with our people. And I can't really describe another way on how we created this environment. Willie and I showed up to the office every day and we worked alongside with our team and we uh, mentored when it was necessary. We celebrated success when we had the opportunity. We came alongside our people when they were hurting because, life
Mhm.
happens and, families experience tragedy. We had that and we just did life with people. And I'm going to say something probably that is going to sound ridiculous, but how much money we made was never like, I didn't walk in the morning and be like, how much money am I going to make today? It wasn't even something I thought about until we talked about our jobs on Tuesday. And I made sure that I had enough money to pay my bills. Really,
Mhm.
that was my focus. What my focus was, how can I serve my team? And how can I love them? And how can I pour into them? And then they in turn do the same to our customers. And it's tough to describe. I knew you were asking this question and it's hard to articulate what we did. And it was just like every day For 17 years, we did that. And people would come to work for us and they stay 10, 15 years
Hmm.
because they just loved being part of it. How else can you describe a team that, sucks sewage out of a crawl space together and they're like, this is great?
Yeah.
Not great, right? The reason why people are in restoration is because they have a deeper satisfaction in the everyday work with people that they work with and who they're helping. So we just believed that in our guts and lived it every day. And I don't have some grandiose answer for that question, but I will say that not from a spot of arrogance, but I know that we had a great culture at Alpha Omega. Alpha Omega, like the people would ride or die for me and Willie. They would have.
Hmm.
And it's not because, I don't even know how we did that. We just loved them. We loved them. And I still love them. It was the joy of my life to lead that team, truly.
And
Mm.
I think that it sounds like what you're saying is people felt like they were genuinely cared for and loved, not as like, "Oh, hey, I wanna make a bunch of money off you, and I've been told if you have a good morale that you'll be more efficient." That th it w They knew that the motivation was not that. They knew that Julie and Willie, they legitimately care for me. I'm going through this stuff at home, and they listen, they mentor, they coach. I am not just some way for them to extract value, uh, through doing a job, that I'm a human that's seen and loved and cared for. And that was ultimately the glue that, hey, if people felt that, they can get into like a messy, non-glamorous situation and feel, "This is a great job."
Yes. And it's genuine. It's
Yeah.
not transactional.
Yes.
It's relational. And that's just I don't know how else to live, honestly. So it's just what we do. I just really just care about the people and in turn they care about you, just how it goes. It's
So,
relationship.
I I imagine here, like, leaders listening to this, watching this video, and them I hear the first step has to be, if you wanna be a good leader, you have to check your intentions, because if your intention is just make as much money as humanly possible, or grow your profile, or be seen as a success in the eyes of your high school classmates, or whatever that motivation is, that's going to ultimately influence the culture that you create. If your intention, and I made a note as you were describing your origin story, you and Willie got into restoration because you wanted to serve people who were going through their worst day, and it doesn't surprise me that this topic of serving and loving continues to come up with your employees as well. And so I hear that first step has to be like, do the deep hard work of understanding your intentions, because whether you like it or not, that's going to shape and influence the culture you create in your company. Is that correct?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I think how you interact with your team and each individual person on your team shapes the culture of your company. It's genuine. It's from a place of care and concern. Even when you have to correct somebody, it's from a place of care and concern for the person, not necessarily the undesired outcome that you might be experiencing, you know, in your company or with your team. It's truly out of the care and concern for the person. And so, again, I can look back at just growing as a leader myself in developing my team. Initially, I wasn't that great at that. I would get frustrated. And I had that attitude of like, well, I may as well just do it myself. And I think maybe others can probably relate with that because Sometimes, if you're looking just at what's directly in front of you, it might be easier to do it yourself. But that is not going to sustain you as a company because you cannot be everything for everyone. So, if I had to grow through that mentality early on, it was definitely something that I had to realize and grow through because um, I could have never ran our company by me doing everything myself. And so that's when I really had to lean into being like, okay, Julie, you know how to do the things every day, but now your job is to teach your team how
Hmm.
to do it every day and then to trust them, give them room to make mistakes. And when they do, come alongside them and say, hey, maybe next time. Or I've made the same mistake and this is what we need to do and just, move forward. So I think just Willie and I think did that well with our teams. And in turn, we had very devoted, committed team members over the years.
So let's drill into that a little bit more. How you created that next generation of leaders. Um, it's yeah, it's one thing for you to say, "Hey, this is important to me," but it's another thing to say, "Hey, I see this in this person, they could be a good leader." And
Mhm.
we were chatting about before we hit record, oftentimes people think, "Hey, this person's an excellent water tech, so I can now put them in a management role," and there's a whole new set of skills. And so because I hear that leadership and team culture is so tied to character, help me understand what are the character qualities that you looked for when identifying who those potential leaders were in your organization?
Yeah. So I think a good leader is somebody who is, willing to be vulnerable. They have the trust of the people who they are leading, and they have the ability to, see the big picture and see where everyone's fitting into it and come alongside their team members and just walk the journey with them, meet them where they're at and then help them along the way. So, I mean, that's as about as simplistic as I can explain it. And I really think what I learned to do through the process is just, admit when I'm wrong, to show people it's okay to make mistakes and learn together because we all can improve. Just because you're a leader definitely doesn't mean that anybody is expecting perfection. It just means that that person is willing to put in the time and effort to mentor folks to, where they need to be. So I look for somebody in a leader that is relational, who is vulnerable, who is willing to have difficult conversations and not put them off, but also have those difficult conversations from a place of truly wanting what's best for the person they're having it with,
Hmm.
so honest and, cor- being just having a direct and kind conversation with somebody from a place of love rather than a place of condemnation.
Hmm. Can we explore this vulnerability piece a little bit more? Because I imagine if podcasts existed 50 years ago and we were interviewing people on like what's a good leader 50 years ago, I think the answer would be like, well, you got to be stoic and you got to be able to march forward and don't show people that you're weak and you got to put on a brave face. That like that's the stereotype of a like I don't know, macho leader that maybe in another generation people would have thought that's what I need to become if I'm going to be a good leader. And I
Yeah.
think that some people probably have outdated views on what they need to be in order to be a good leader. So help me understand. that vulnerability piece, like, why you think vulnerability makes a good leader, and what healthy vulnerability looks like as a leader, and what unhealthy vulnerability looks like as a leader.
Well, I think vulnerability is an important component to building trust because people relate to you. They don't
Mm,
feel like you're this like king of the mountain that you're just looking at going like, I could never be that person. That person isn't approachable. I think that a healthy vulnerability, which is just like being honest about things that you might struggle with, not in a way where you're like complaining about it or you are, like a victim mentality for me, this blah, blah, but in a way where you're like relatable, you know? And then I think people are like, gosh, they're like me, I can resonate with that. I also struggle with that. And I stand by the philosophy of like, we are all more alike than we are different. Some people are just in different positions. And so everyone needs a leader. So somebody has to be in that position, but that doesn't make you unlike everybody else. So it's just a key component to developing relationship with people is being willing to be honest, not overshare, but just relate. And I think that's what we always tried to do, really. When I was frustrated, I'd be like, gosh, you guys, I'm just having a bad day. I'm just going to go out for a walk
mhm,
and just be real because we're all humans. And I just found that when I was vulnerable, other people were vulnerable with me, which of course I love because then I get to, speak life to them. Just be like, hey, this is where we're all at. Not even just as it pertains to business, but just as people, I had many women that worked in my office. So I was able to have a voice and speak into their life. And that's what was fun about it to me. I thrive off of relationships and just trying to love people. And so that's what I did. I don't
mhm.
know. I guess I just do it more naturally because when you ask me a question about how I do it, I'm like, I don't know. I just
But,
don't.
but
I
you had to identify what are the qualities I want the next leader in our company to have. And it
Mhm.
sounds like, I hear the vulnerability, the relationality, trust of team members, willing to not run away from difficult conversations,
Yes.
but lean into them. And so help me understand, maybe you have an example of like the opposite, where on the surface there are strong technical skills, and you know someone might say, oh, that person could be a good leader and they could teach other people how to do the job well. But like, what are the qualities of, when you're looking at it, you're like, actually, I don't think that they're going to be a good leader because of X or Y or Z.
Yeah, I think that's the person that doesn't lean into relationship.
Hmm.
I think it's the differentiator. So, I mean, you like I said, we talked earlier about being just somebody that's really good, like let's say the best technician. They can go and do a fantastic job, knock the job out of the park. But, you know, the actual technical side of the job is important, very important. And I'm not going to like discredit it because obviously it's important.
Hmm.
But without the relational side with the team members, with the customer, with the company as a whole, because everyone plays a part in the job, whether you're on the job site or not. If that's missing, the job could go totally south, right?
Yeah.
If there's no communication, if we're not doing our part with documentation and such. But so I think just somebody that is not focused on the people around them and the relational aspect of others is definitely a hindrance in being a leader. If you don't have those skills, it's a hindrance to being a leader.
The last question I have for you on this stream, and then I just got a few rapid fire questions to close things out. You had to go through the process of, what are the qualities that I want in a leader? How do I cultivate maybe I recognize somebody has those character qualities, but it takes time and intentionality and mentoring to go from recognizing someone has a few character qualities of being a great leader to them becoming a great leader. And then it takes even more work to have that person begin to cultivate leaders among their staff as well. And so how did you cultivate a culture that not only identified leaders, but helped leaders build leaders themselves, if that makes sense?
Yes. So I think that we modeled leadership behavior and then gave others the opportunity to step into those positions and then be that leader as well, with
Mm,
us standing by and observing when we needed to come alongside our leader, right? Because again, it's a whole separate skill set that people have to practice. They train for it, right? They put nobody's ever I don't think you're really ready to go in and lead a team of people. You prepare and then you do it. So, in the process, you give people opportunities to step up into leadership positions, whether it's a project or it's, they get people who will then now directly report to them. You just give opportunities and you step alongside others and mentor them along the way. Honestly, that's what happened for me. I obviously had the opportunity because I owned the company, but I sought help in that. And, with other business owners who I knew and trusted, with consulting firms, with people that I developed really positive relationships. So people were able to speak into my life and to help me. And that's just, I think, how this wonderful world works, right? We try new skills. We have people that come alongside us and it just keeps going. So that's how we did it. We just gave people opportunities and walked the path with them.
mm. That's a perfect segue into my, first rapid fire question, which is what timeless truths, mottos, like, things have you held on to as a leader that have helped serve you that you would wanna share with people that are wanting to build leaders themselves?
So really, my North Star, if you will, for being a leader is the fact that, I'm a person of faith. I love the Lord and want to serve Him first and foremost. So I try and do that in my daily life. And when I owned Alpha Omega, it was by loving my team well. That was really my primary focus, was to figure out how I could serve each and every member of my team and how our leadership team could in turn do that. So we had 5 people in our leadership team and we just really focused on living our team well. So uh, that's that's what we did at Alpha. And that's, what I'm continuing to do out after Alpha and will
Mhm.
do till the day I die.
Awesome.
So
Hey, that's, the fruit speaks for itself, so that's good. Last question I have, I'm curious what advice or feedback, is there a lesson that you have, that a leader has given you over the years that's stayed with you?
yes, I dare give Scott Tackett a honorable mention here in this. I don't know if you know him, but he is an advisor for vital load management. And I took a leadership class from him once that I loved, learned a lot from. But one of the things that he always said is to be firm, fair, and consistent. And that is something that is on repeat in my head, even to this day, because as leaders, we get the opportunity to be, the people that needs to be firm sometimes with our team and fair, and then just be consistent. I think it's great advice if you have a team of 30 people, and it's a great advice as a mom.
Totally.
It's just like in general, I think really foundational. when you have people looking to you to be their leader.
Julie, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. And this is absolutely going to be helpful for the next generation of leaders. I like this the idea of in Alpha Omega, you helped inspire leadership. And I like that even now, after Alpha Omega, through things like this, that you're continuing to do so. So I appreciate you giving us your time.
Oh, I really appreciate the opportunity. This kind of thing is really fun. So thank you.
All right, that is all for this month's episode of the Restoration Playbook Podcast. Once again, huge thanks to Julie Johnson for sharing her expertise and perspective. Don't forget, you can get Julie's insights combined with over a dozen other leaders in the industry in our new book, Building Leaders. You can get that at buildingleadersbook.com. Free copy is available to you, or you can buy a hard copy on Amazon or listen to the official audiobook wherever you're listening to this podcast. We're releasing new chapters of the official audiobook every week until the entire book is out. And so you can find it now. We already have 5 or 6 chapters out. We've got even more coming. So make sure to subscribe to that. Subscribe to this podcast if you're not subscribed to already. Please share it with your friends and coworkers, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.